Recently, an eccentric, incredibly wealthy man launched a massive public crowdfunding campaign. His ambition? To send ships across a vast, deadly void to a hostile, faraway frontier. He wanted to establish a permanent settlement, harvest the resources, and return astronomical profits to his shareholders. Yes, I am talking about early modern European merchants. Perhaps you are bored of your life, your old routine. Perhaps you want more economic freedom. You heard that someone discovered a vast new continent, and you want to claim a piece of it for yourself. But how? Today, we will guide you step by step in how you can become a successful transatlantic colonialist. Please take notes. Or don't. If you prefer to starve to death, die of a tropical disease, be killed by the locals, or get captured by the pirates, let us begin. First thing first, you cannot walk to the new world. You need ships, supplies, weapons, and a lot of desperate people, all of which cost a ton of money. Well, here are the ways to fund your transatlantic startup. The first way is to find an angel investor. If you are Spanish or early French, your monarchs have a lot of spare change in their pockets. You can pitch directly to the king. They will grant you the direct backing of the national military and immense royal resources. However, the taxes are brutal. They fund you, so they own a huge portion of the cake. The Spanish crown, for example, demanded a 20% cut of absolutely everything you stole from the locals. Acquired from the locals. And if you failed, a royal covenant does not technically go bankrupt. If your crown colony becomes too expensive or disastrous, the king will simply abandon it, or you will be conquered by a rival empire. The second way is to sell your stock to the public. If you are Dutch, English, or later French, you use corporate money. You form a massive corporation and sell shares to the public. The Dutch created the Verenigde Oost-Indische Company in 1602, raising over 6 million guilders from everyday citizens in the world's first stock market. They later formed the West India Company in 1621, specifically to occupy lands in the Americas. England formed groups like the Virginia Company to fund its settlements. France also shifted to this model. It generates immense startup capital and spread the financial risk among many different investors. But like a modern company, if you mismanage it, it will go bankrupt. Your land could be abandoned like the Popham colony. The king also may step in and take over your business, making it a crown colony. This was the phase of the Virginia Company. Your colony could also get sold off to a private buyer, like when the Knights of Malta just outright bought the island of Saint Christophe from the French Trading Company, making it the third kind of colony. Sometimes the crown wants a colony, but is too broke or too busy to manage it themselves. They use the franchise model. They grant a massive chunk of land to a wealthy noble or private organization to manage, essentially holding it from the king in a feudal manner. Portugal tried this early on by dividing Brazil into 15 decentralized hereditary captaincies. England used it for proprietary colonies like Pennsylvania and Maryland. This type of colony enjoys maximum autonomy. Proprietors own the place privately and can run it with minimal government intervention, often allowing settlers to elect their own leaders. However, the failure rate is catastrophically high. To convince people to actually move to your private swamp instead of a safer corporate town, owners often have to dilute their own power and give away a lot of political rights to the settlers. Most of Portugal's private captaincies completely collapsed from poor leadership or lack of resources, and the territory reverted right back to the state. In the colony business, whether you are a corporate CEO or a private franchise owner, the moment you liquidate it, the crown is always waiting to repossess your land. The second step is to pick a location. Location is everything in real estate. Naturally, you want a location with the appropriate resources. You want to make maximum profits to make you rich as quickly as possible. However, how you pick your target depends entirely on what time you arrive at the colonization party. If you are Spain, congratulations, you are the early bird. You claim the entirety of the continent for yourself. You simply went straight for the golden jugular and took possession of the best-known gold and silver mining regions like Mexico and Peru. If you are Portugal, you get the consolation prize from the Pope. He drew a line on the globe, dividing the world between you and Spain. You were given Brazil. Unfortunately, there was no obvious gold there. The most valuable resource was Brazil wood, which is good for making red dye. Since that's it, you largely focused your efforts on Asia. You built a trading post empire, establishing highly fortified coastal forts called fortresses along the Indian Ocean to dominate the lucrative spice trade instead. You only began formally colonizing Brazil because the French started smuggling your wood. If you are English, French, or Dutch, too bad you arrived late. The Spanish have already taken the gold, and they are highly aggressive. They have already slaughtered French settlements in Florida and the Carolinas. They also attack English settlements in the Caribbean. To survive, you must pivot to alternative business models. You could look for places closer to the equator to grow things your home country depends on importing, such as sugar, coffee, cotton, and tobacco. The Dutch eventually captured Caribbean islands and part of South America to grow sugarcane and tobacco. The English colony of Jamestown was quite literally saved from complete collapse by a massive boom in the demand for tobacco. The main drawback of this strategy is that Englishmen tend to die in a very large number in these hot climates.
Should be interesting.
If you want to avoid the Spanish
Are you Spanish?
and the tropical diseases,
Ah, good. We don't like you Spanish.
you head far north to places like New England or New Netherlands. There's absolutely no gold there either. Instead, you trade with the Native Americans for furs or catch fish in the North Atlantic. It lacks the dramatic shine of silver, but the colonial guide John Smith recommended it. It ain't much, but it's an honest work. A colony is useless without people to do the heavy lifting, but recruiting is difficult. You must run a marketing campaign to convince volunteers to board your ships. You need to advertise. Tell them the scorching disease-ridden climate is a Mediterranean paradise. Ensure you recruit men who are used to actual hard work, rather than lazy men who think they will get rich quickly like the Spanish did. Speaking of the Spanish, they had a different labor plan. They forced the native populations to mine silver and grow food. However, there was a massive problem with this business model. Europeans brought diseases like smallpox with them. The native populations has no immunity. In Mexico alone, disease killed an estimated 8 million people by the end of 1520. The native workforce died, and the colonies needed more laborers than Europe could supply. Not to worry, the Portuguese found an easy solution that other colonizers could follow. Now, you have arrived in the Americas. Your strategy for surviving the first years to establish a permanent base depends entirely on whether there is an existing empire for you. However, no matter which country you are, you cannot survive without the Native Americans. If you are Spanish, you do not build a city, you steal one. Even though you arrive with indestructible armor, boomsticks, and terrifying half-ton Pokemon, you cannot conquer an empire alone. You have two options: convince the oppressed locals to help you overthrow the hated imperial overlords, or ambush the emperor, demand a room full of gold for his ransom, and then execute him anyway, collapsing their empire before simply walking into the capital. If you are not Spanish, there are no massive empires with golden capitals waiting for you. Your first order of business is food. Plant food immediately. If you ignore this to search for gold or experiment with cash crops, you will face a starving time, which nearly destroyed the English colony at Jamestown. In your first year, you will likely fail to grow enough food, which means you must trade with the locals to survive. For the English at Jamestown, if the local Powhatan Confederacy had not welcomed them and traded them food, the sickly Englishmen would have entirely perished in their first winter. You must find allies among the locals. However, how you treat these vital allies after you get a permanent base depends on you. The Spanish, having conquered vast populations, began a mass conversion of the indigenous people to believe the guy in Rome. Because mostly Spanish men migrated, intermarriage between ethnic Spaniards and natives became a common occurrence, marking the beginning of the modern Mexican nation. The English took a different path. Once they became sustainable by themselves, they decided the natives no longer needed to coexist. so they start the process of making them cease to exist. Choose your location carefully, secure your funding, prepare to fight both locals and rival Europeans, and don't forget to import your manpower for your farm.
300 black men for only £2. Yes, sir.